It's the Global Thought Leader Insights. Brilliant thinking implemented. Brought to you by Internal Consulting Group. I'm Mark S.A. Smith. As a leader of your company, you must stay on top of your industry or risk obsolescence. This can be a daunting task. Get ready to solve your biggest challenges and learn how to capitalize on your biggest opportunities after this. Executives depend on external advisors to fill knowledge and experience gaps, to help them make a case for change, or to have an experienced mind audit their thinking. Internal Consulting Group brings together a wide range of proven thought leaders from around the globe and makes them available to you. Get access to insights, advice, and the tools you need to succeed. Learn more at internalconsulting.com. Our guest today is Michael Roche, who is a ICG world expert on partnerships. He has his master's degree in accounting. He has his JD, as well as a doctorate in alliances and joint ventures. He has worked with companies around the globe, from Johannesburg to Oslo, from Los Angeles to Sydney, to put together the talent and the rewards to help companies grow. You're going to love this conversation. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Mark, for the kind introduction. Pleasure to be here.
And you are joining us from Zurich today.
That's right.
World Business and Banking headquarters. And today we are a global society. Even small businesses have to do things globally. And there is more of a challenge in getting talent to help us grow the right way than ever before. So let's talk about how do we go about bringing the talent into the organization so we can achieve our business goals?
Well, that's a great question for starters, Mark. Thank you. And there's many things that have to come together to get the right people and to get them at the pace that we need them. Currently, funny you asked the question. Currently, I'm working with a startup in Germany that has grown very rapidly over the last 3 years, and they cannot possibly hire on enough people fast enough to be able to achieve the delivery that they need to achieve. It's a company that does social media outsourcing, and what they've done, what we helped them do, is we helped them put in place a very nice sort of career path framework for their millennial generation that is coming in, who want very fast moving clicks in their career, right? So they can move very quickly from role to role, just whatever pace they're comfortable with. But around that, the bubble around that, what we did is we said there's got to be a ecosystem of two types of things. One is of other boutiques that they can ask for help when they run into capacity issues, that they work with on a consistent basis, do joint pitches together, etc. And then around that, there is sort of this pool of freelancers. So they are now scouring the various platforms, various freelance platforms that there are. And when they find, for example, a graphic artist who think they'll just fit for a project, they'll work with that person, and eventually, if it works, they stay as a freelancer or they become then an employed person. So there is, besides being a shortage of talent in the big economies for a lot of different things, especially for 21st century types of jobs. The nice thing is about the 21st century is that you've got other ways in which you can source that talent. You don't just have to hire people on, and that's what we're doing.
Michael, you just covered a lot of ground in that 90 seconds or so that you spoke.
Yeah.
And I want to unpack that for our listener.
Sure.
Because it's a lot of stuff there. You're obviously extremely intelligent. You know your stuff. You've been doing this for 20 years. And what you laid out for us is you said there's essentially three strategies that we have here.
Mm-hmm.
Number one is outsource. This company is growing really fast because their clients are outsourcing social media, which is an option for all of us. Let's find somebody who's an expert. Let's bring them in, and we'll work with them to outsource this. So that's one end of the spectrum for finding talent.
Mm-hmm.
And so this outsource company itself is having challenges because they need to find this combination of employees who they can bring to bear, as well as other people they're bringing in for the outside to do a specific gig. And what we've really set up is this continuum of employee, gig, and outsource.
That's right.
And so we've got this continuum here that we could all tap into to get this done. And in each one of these cases, there's different approaches to how we engage, how we compensate, how we incentivize, and how we reward. Now, on top of all of that,
That's right.
you're talking about millennials, which right now is half the workforce worldwide.
Yeah.
And the last stats I saw was about 2/3 of millennials don't want raises, they want promotions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so now that we've got the platform set, let's pick one of these and dig into it. Where should we start? Should we talk about the employees? How do you find and reward that talent and make it work with a millennial mindset?
Absolutely. Just for disclosure, I turn 49 tomorrow. So
congratulations, happy birthday!
Thank you. Yeah, I'm working on it. Thank you. But the reason why I say that is because most of my clients that I work with don't have, they're executives who are, aged, my age, 40, 45, 50, 60 plus years old. So it was a real challenge for me to actually flex to that particular organization because, the founder and MD is 35 and the average age of the crew is 28 or something like that. So it was a bit of a challenge to flex to that. But what we found very quickly is exactly what you said. So people are looking for progression very quickly, and they're looking for learning. And we recognize that. So we build the entire talent brand and the career path within that talent brand around being able to progress quickly. So instead of traditional type of business where you might say, well, annually we can look at what you've done and we can, see if we can move a position, or every 2 years, every 3 years. Here we're saying there is a properly structured conversation every 4 months, where you may progress, you may not progress, but at least there is the option that if you're on track and if you've learned the things that you've said you're going to learn, that you can move on. So it's and you don't just move straight up. You can move to a different part of the company that does more data analytics if that suits you more. You can move into the creative side. So we try to sort of make it modular, right? And that's and that has really helped bring people on board and to a degree also keep people there.
Now again, you in 90 seconds, you gave us such rich food. I want to take this apart a little bit because for you this is second nature, but I want to pull this out for our listener. So first of all, you use the word talent brand.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a critical concept because millennials don't choose careers; they choose culture.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. Mm-hmm.
And brand is what is determined by culture.
Also determined by culture. Yeah.
That's right. So what you're saying is that part of what we have to do is create this talent strategy that itself has a brand.
Yes. Also. Mm-hmm.
That's a really powerful concept. Now, most people listening are going to say, yeah, we have our corporate brand, but we've never really put together our talent brand. This seems to me to be an innovation that can really massively help people bring the right people in.
Thank you for saying that. I think it's not quite that strong. I think HR people who are really switched on to the topic, they have recognized that you need a talent brand that complements your overall brand and the overall strategy you're trying to drive. It has to be supportive, right? I think what is different in this context that we're talking about is that how do the future employees of this company that we're talking about as a case study, how do these future employees come to the company? They come to the company also via what? The social media channels. They don't tend to come through the recruiters, right? I mean, they tend to come through the social media channels themselves. So how you build that brand and how you communicate about what you can offer, these folks is very important. And if that's what brand means, yes, absolutely. And there, we're competing against other companies that are, some of which are very established and just have gotten into this sort of new service, but some are similar startups. So you're competing, in part your business model competes as well a little bit, in terms of where can I be in 3 years' time. Yes, the talent brand, I think, to make that explicit and to consciously drive that, to invest in it I think that is important. Certainly when you're struggling for talent, that's one of the places where you look is, what is the foundation of the talent, overall proposition. And then we see what is the internal perception about that brand, and how do we improve that brand, both in contents, how do we make the contents better, and also how do we improve the communication around it better? How do we, gloss it up better?
Who should be responsible for designing that brand? Should that be the CEO or should that be HR? Who is responsible for that?
I think it's an excellent question. And ideally, if we're looking at a 21st century organization, it is co-created by everyone across the organization. So practically what that means, it depends a bit on how big you are, right? I mean, if you've got 10,000 people, it's a different story compared to when you're, 12 or 100 or 200. But ideally, the people who think about the brand is a cross section of, clearly it's a CEO issue without question, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Clearly, you've got to have your HR dedicated folks to the degree that you have them. You've got to have them involved. But I don't think you can just turn it over to HR. You've got to have a cross section of people within the organization who lives it, breathes it, and evolves it, and advocates it, and evangelizes it. Otherwise, you've got no chance. If just HR makes it up, then the crew has they're like, well, that's great, that's HR, but it doesn't apply to me.
Well, then in that particular case, if we turn it over to HR, then they're going to be responsible for the brand of the company. So I think that this what we're really talking about is brand application. We take the culture of the company and we apply it as a branding process to the HR to help enforce the culture so that we deliver the brand.
Ideally, yes, and ideally, HR will help drive the discussion.
Yes,
right.
Ideally,
will influence the CEO. Ideally, will drive the discussion. Now, if you're asking me how often that happens, I'm the HR folks who are switched on, they will drive that discussion, and they will earn the permission to do that.
All right. I love that. I love that concept. Then you said a well-defined career path that's modularized.
Yep.
And we do a review every 4 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, some people are listening and thinking, oh, I hate doing annual reviews. You're going to give me 3 times the pain here.
Yes.
And I think what we have to do is back up and go, no. Don't look at it that way. Annual reviews are painful because they're done annually.
Yeah.
And if we do them over shortest time spans, they actually become less painful.
That's right.
And more meaningful and substantially more impactful.
Absolutely. I think you've said that very well, and I don't have to say anything, but I do want to say something on it. And that is let us go back and think about what that annual review is designed to do, right? In most companies, it's a very bureaucratic process whereby a couple of things happen. One, you sit down and you agree. At best, you agree. At worst, you're given, a number of goals that you've got to achieve during the next year. Then that year passes. I'm now overstating things a little bit, right? But then that year passes, and you go back to it and you say, "Oh, I'm going to dig out my paper here and see. Oh gosh, of those 2 goals, those 2 I've forgotten, and the third one, I think I sort of got there." And then,
because they didn't look at the paper since the last review anyway.
Since then, that's right. Anyway, that's right. And then what happens is that then the boss comes and says, "Well, okay, I think overall, based on this here, either the same criteria or a different criteria catalog, I think you did well here, you didn't do so well here. So this year you did sort of you just about met my expectations." And that then is a straight line to, if you've got a variable performance compensation type of structure, that then ties into how much bonus you will get, and maybe it'll tie into what your salary increases for next year. Well, of course, I'm describing it in a bit of a horrible sort of way, but in a lot of companies, large and small, from 40,000 employees to 100 employees, that's still how a lot of companies do that, and that doesn't
not
work,
anymore.
Right? It doesn't. It's not. I'm not sure actually it ever has worked.
It did work. I take that, Michael. It did work.
Did it?
It worked. It worked in the military where it was originated.
Okay, it might have done, but did it work to motivate people? Did it work to motivate people? Is the question.
In the military, you're motivated because if you do, or you go to jail.
That's not your motivator. Exactly.
It's a different strategy. So what's happened is we took something out of context,
right?
And we put it into another location, and I don't think it ever did work.
Well,
It worked in the military, but it doesn't work anywhere else. It's time to drop that concept.
And I think that's right. So what it does is it's a huge paper tiger. It's all about results, not about development, which is really the conversation you want to have with the people. It breeds cynicism, it demotivates, and more often than not, it serves as an excuse to sort of set predetermined reward outcomes, i.e., I want to give this person a big bonus, therefore I've got to get to an above expectation, therefore I'm going to find a way to get to that above expectation, right?
Exactly.
Done well, those kinds of conversations, right? They align people to goals. It focuses you on development as to what do we need to do next. Ideally, it drives engagement. Ideally, it creates a good tie from this is what this person has contributed to the company and to the reward that the person gets, ideally, right? But with an annual process, that doesn't work, right? This batch process doesn't work. There's a bunch of management literature out there, not just recently, that says, look, that batch process just doesn't work. On top of that, these ratings, people have tried to quantify it down, because if you have that in that conversation in a qualitative way, then you how do you translate that into reward? So people try to just quantify it down. But there's a study done by Wharton about 3 years ago that basically concluded that 62% of the variance of the scores is based on the manager's perception of what kind of person you are and how you've done, rather than the actual contribution that you've made.
62%. That's massive.
62%. Only 21% of that study found is due to that employee's performance, right? That's go to the Harvard Business Review 2015 Wharton study again. It's and that's shocking, right? So a lot of it sits in the manager's discretion, and it's just the wrong conversation to have. It's not motivating, even how we're talking about it now, right? It's stressful to discuss. So what's happened
is it's actually insane. Is what that
it's a bit bad, right? So a couple of companies have experimented to just abolish that annual review process. So for example, Deloitte.
Well, but we can't do that.
Well,
because how does a person know how to advance? How do they know how to get promoted?
There you go.
And if millennials are going to a job to get promoted,
right,
how can they get promoted if they don't have an annual review, or they don't have some sort of review process or goal setting? And there's got to be a feedback process to get them promoted.
Exactly.
We'll be back with more after this. The world is moving fast. It's difficult to keep up. Your executive team needs new ideas to keep them ahead of the competition. Download and share the Internal Consulting Group's monthly executive magazine, The Insights Review. Every issue includes thought leadership and ideas that you can leverage to solve issues and harvest opportunities facing you. Get your complimentary copy from internalconsulting.com/publications. Let's have a conversation about what gets a person promoted, right? What gets them promoted?
What gets them promoted, or what should get them promoted?
Well, what gets them promoted is this is this is a great conversation.
Yeah.
So today, from my experience, what gets people promoted is simply this: they continuously make good, sound decisions, and they don't embarrass the boss.
Okay.
All right. So that's my viewpoint. Tell me yours. What gets them promoted?
In actuality, Look, I don't have a empirical answer to that question. What I do know is that too many times people get promoted for the wrong reasons. So you've got all of the biases involved, right? From latency effect, we see that all the time, right? I mean, I've got one example of a global business. We worked with them about 2 years ago, where it was, they knew it. They knew they had to get in the back of a cab with the global CEO between November and December to make sure that they could get all their points and of all the stuff that they did, so that they could do well in the January review process. Right? They know they had to ride in the back of the cab with a guy to take the message. Wrong reason to get promoted, right? In terms of content, in terms of what's ideally, you get promoted, not even promoted, you get moved into a different role because based on what you've learned, you're better suited now for the role that either has been created or that now exists, right? Ideally, that's the case. And the question is, how can you identify that, that new ability in the employee, and how can you make sure that you can move that person across? And I tell you what, the annual process that we've been talking about
Right.
is not the way to do it, because once a year, how can you even think, you can't remember what the guy did in March.
That's right.
So you asked what why we got to the 3 times a year discussions, and it is really twofold. First, a couple of companies have tried to abolish completely the annual process, and for example, Deloitte in the US has gone to some coaching conversations. Facebook, I think, has tried to eliminate those discussions, and what they found was that the individuals need some process. They need some structured discussion where they are, if you will, given the grade, right? So we've got to have a structured process, but we know annual isn't enough, and we know we got to have something. What we said was, well, ideally, right, best practice tells us, well, you do it once a quarter. Reality is once a quarter is far too often. It doesn't fit with the cycle very well, because you've got the summer in Europe. People take off. You've got the December 31st. A lot of things happen before financial year end. So doing it around there is not very good. So for this particular company, we said it's going to be 3 times a year, because we can time it when the business cyclically is less busy than other times. Number one. Number two, I can then fine tune development that person has to have, not just for the next role, but for to do the job well, right? What you can then do is when you look at your reward decisions, you then have at least a couple of conversations where you can say, well, I can see the trajectory, I can see the contribution that person has done, and so forth. So we've said, look, in this company, it's going to be 3 times a year. The other way to do it, or in supplement of the two, is that you can think about really 21st century stuff, and you can say, well, we can gamify a portion of how we look at this, right?
Yes.
So we can think about a gamified platform where both my boss, my peer, my subs, maybe my clients can input in terms of how I've done, and then I can aggregate that over the year and see, okay, this person has gotten, I don't know, hundreds of tokens from people. This person hasn't gotten that many tokens from people. We can see, well, what's going on here, what's going on with this person, how do we make that work? So there's some tools that are now available, and then of course, if I'm allowing that sort of broader input, which goes far beyond the traditional 360, right? Then the question is, of course, what psychological safety can I create so that people actually give the right input, that people aren't afraid of peers and subs and bosses inputting and so forth. But sorry, I'm sort of going off on various different tangents here based on the very good question that you've asked. But that's
no, it's all good.
That's what it is.
Well, there's so many pieces here. There's so many pieces here that we have to consider. First of all, we obviously have to pivot away from an old model that was very much baby boomer driven to a newer model that's much more acceptable and valuable, motivating and rewarding to the millennials, which have a different view of value. They still respect the same thing that millennials and Gen X respect, which is respect.
Mm-hmm.
We have respect for each other, that they appreciate ability, they appreciate talent, but what they see is the reward changes. And I think that's a massive difference. Also, the way the baby boomers operated were very much authority driven. I was taught to respect authority versus my millennial kids will flip me off, tell me the F word and walk out of the house. And it's just a very different view. And so we have to make these pivots to help understand how to motivate, reward, and develop talent in this new pool. Now, it's going to get even worse as we go to the Z-Gen. But let's leave that for another conversation.
Yeah, let's.
I think you've done a really great job talking about some of the things that we have to consider when we're developing a talent pool of millennials. Let's pivot to talking about gigs,
mm-hmm.
where we bring people in to do a particular task or a job, and then they're in and out. So just a quick contractor versus a a professional services organization. What changes as we work with a gigster?
Well, a couple of changes. A couple of things change, excuse me. What changes first off is that I've got to find a way to get that person, if it's a new person that I haven't worked with before, I've got to get that person on speed with my organization very quickly, right? They have to be able to get to my culture pretty quickly. They have to understand how we work pretty quickly. They have to understand what's acceptable and what doesn't work very quickly, and they've got to be up to quality very quickly. That's an investment that I've got to make in every gigster that I work with. That's similar.
We've got to plug them into the culture, and we have to plug them into the process.
That's right, and actually, process is a very good word. To me, working with a group of gig folks is I've got to have really good workflows, really good processes inside my company that I can plug them into. Because what doesn't work is, if I'm just working with a small group of employees, you can sort of make up the process, right? But once I'm working with a lot of externals who come in and out, I've got to have good workflows internally, whatever it is that I have the external do, whether it's something that's internal to the business or whether it's client facing or whatever.
It's a combination of what we want as far as our quality control, timing control, communication process. So that has to be well defined.
That's right.
Now, it seems to me as we have to do this anyway if we're going to have an organization of employees that can be fairly fluid in their ability to move from job to job as they prepare for their promotion. So this sounds like it's going to be a universal.
Well, that's true.
Situation.
That's true. Except I've got more time to indoctrinate people with my culture if they are quote unquote mine. I mean, if I've got somebody who's been working with me for 5 years in my division, in my company, whichever, then actually I can use that person to evangelize the gigster, right? But with the gigster, that person has to come on board pretty quickly. On the other hand, people who work a lot as gigsters, if you will, they know that and they are used to adapting pretty quickly. I mean, they become chameleons pretty quickly, pretty well.
Good gigsters are chameleons.
That's right. That's right. And then I guess the other context or the other question is, how do you reward people, right? So you've got, it depends on how tightly you tie in the gigsters into your business, right? So if you've got long-term gigsters who work side by side with your employees for months and years, that's a different situation compared to if gigster comes for 3 months and then it's gone. Once you've got that sort of close pool of gigsters that you work with, I mean, employment laws aside, once you've got that long-term pool of gigsters that you work with, then you also on the reward side have to make sure that your relativities between the internal folks doing that particular work and the external folks, that those relativities aren't completely out of whack. That's sort of the reward implication. And then we can talk about, variable comp as well. But, we've got to be just a bit careful. They're more careful than we would have to be with just project folks or consultants that we bring on board for a couple of months.
I think that's a really important thing to point out. If there's too big of a gap between how you compensate your employee talent and your gigster talent, that creates a problem.
Yep.
In a motivational set in both directions.
In both directions. So it essentially extends the problem that you have anyway. So let's assume that you don't work with any gigsters, right? One of the things that you do is you look at your various roles and you see how they fit with internal relativity and external competitiveness, right? You just have to overlay a dimension for your gigsters when you're looking at that. Certainly the long-term gigsters, and we're talking. You can, some look at that just in the base comp context. Some look at it in the total comp context. I like to look at all of the dimensions. So whether it depends on how complex your reward structure is, right? Whether if you just have a salary and bonus, it's fairly straightforward. If you've got salary and bonus and profit shares and equity, then it becomes a bit more complicated as to how that has to work.
Sure, and even along the lines of working strategy, where do they work? How do they work? What's the oversight that's required? There's a lot of dimensions to mapping the employee job to the gigster job and how those work out, and especially in the world of millennials where they are comparing notes. They freely compare. Millennials will tell you how much money they make.
Well,
boomers would go, no, I'm not telling you how much money I make.
Yeah, that's actually, you've just touched on a really conflicting issue. The topic of transparency is huge, and we don't even have to get into the generational aspect as much. But as a company, clearly as an employee, you're entitled to know what it is you get paid. Right, you know that automatically. In some very conservative companies, you don't know why you get paid what you get paid. You don't know the why, right? You know what, but you don't know why. Then the next level of transparency is the why you get paid what you get paid, and then you can span that out, right? Do you know where you're at in terms of total results compared to your peers, for example, right? Some companies provide that transparency, right? Some companies provide that. Some companies provide, well, you sit here and he sits there because of, right? You get into that, but that I see rarely, and I'm not sure that that's terribly healthy. But you've got to decide as a company how transparent you want to be. Also, there are some countries now that have some disclosure rules around transparency, around gender and race, etc. But it's how you manage that also then vis-a-vis your gig people that becomes a topic. But reality is, what I tell most clients is, look, if you think that you're keeping it confidential, think again, because as you said, people will typically, at least in their peers, their friends, they will compare notes and talk. And if you've got a big discrepancy there, you do have problems. People will leave.
Indeed. Well, and we see this with things such as Glassdoor, where they'll post their salaries, and millennials will trade privacy for access. It's a currency.
Yeah. It's absolutely, and it goes beyond actually the amount that I get paid. What we know is that it's less important, and that's actually true across the generations. It's less important the amount that I get paid. It's how does my pay compare to the person who's doing a similar job or who's doing better or worse than I do. I want to be sure that relativity works. And externally, if my friend does the exact same job at company X next door, I want to be at least within the bracket. And unless the employer is able to pay within that bracket, you've got a problem there as well.
Indeed. They'll flee the ship just as quickly as they possibly can.
You don't have to beat them, but you've got to be in the bracket. You've got to be in the broad bracket, then it works.
That's right. Boy, we've covered a lot of ground in our conversation here. Unfortunately, we have to wrap it up this time. But what would you like our listener to do? Is there something you'd like them to get to? How should they reach you? What would you like for them to do?
Well, how they can reach me is easy. It's michael.roche@internalconsulting.com. That's easy bit. So if you have any questions or if you found this conversation interesting, then please reach out. That's Michael.Roche.
Michael.Roch.
Yes, R-O-C-H. Four-letter word. Don't make me Irish. Four-letter word, R-O-C-H, @internalconsulting.com. But that's the easy bit. I'm always happy to have a conversation. What I do encourage is that what I would not want people to do is to just treat this very big topic of people management, talent management as a blob of stuff that just needs to get done, and to treat people like they're part of they're just production, right? People, I'm very strong about this, that people are the biggest asset that a company has. They're the most expensive asset in most cases, and even if you might accept that some IP is very valuable, but even that doesn't show up on your balance sheet. The value of your people doesn't show on your balance sheet. It's just an item on the income statement, and that's if the accountants look at it that way, fine. As a business leader, do not look at it that way. People are the biggest asset in your company, and find a way to really harness the potential that the people want to bring to your company. People are there because they want to be part of the company. They want to help it grow. Don't box them. Don't put them into this stupid annual process. Don't make them smaller than they are. The people that you have, make them big so that you can be big with them. That's my biggest. That's what I want people to come out of this podcast. Is they can contact me. That's fine, but that's the biggest message I want to bring.
Right on. The reality is that our employees, our team, is our biggest competitive advantage.
Absolutely.
And you got to treat them like that. So thank you, Michael, for sharing your wisdom and insight on how to find and retain better talent.
Mark, thank you very much for the very delightful conversation.
That wraps up this episode. Go to internalconsulting.com/global-thought-leaders to contact today's guest. If you like the show, share it with your executive team and review us on iTunes. This is Global Thought Leader Insights. Brilliant thinking implemented.